Welcome to the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jonno White. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Clarity. We are an Australian-based consultancy that works with leaders around the world, and our passion is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be in order to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work for and customers line up to buy from. The goal of this podcast is to invest in you and your leadership. If you're just joining us for the first time, then feel free to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, the most popular being our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from around the world in all different sectors give their in-depth answers on leadership, what books they love, what they found most challenging, the most meaningful stories, how they structure their time through the day. That's free, so go and check it out. And we'd love to interview you about your leadership. I believe you have advice from your experience, your context, and your life so far that is important and can help other leaders. It's also a great way to give back. It's free to get involved, and you can do so by going to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or just Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form that pops up. We have a free resource for you on our website. It's called Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook. It has interviews with 10 world-class leaders, and you can go to consultclarity.org. It's right at the top, and get that today. We also have a daily email that we send out to over 15,000 leaders, and that email contains the highlights, our best content from our podcasts, our blog, my book, the books that we're loving that are out there about leadership. It's also the best way to get access to our masterclasses and workshops before anyone else. And there's also exclusive and limited special options just for subscribers. And you can subscribe by going to consultclarity.org/subscribe. Now, my gift to you is to work incredibly hard to provide the best leadership content I can to invest in you and your leadership. So if you're finding our content helpful, if you find this podcast helpful, then your gift to me could be this. If you do find it helpful, then write a review or rate our content and make sure you subscribe or follow. I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is. It really does help us to get the word out there so we can invest in more leaders to become everything they're meant to be. It also means a lot to me personally when people like you and people in our community share our content on social media. So if you do that, then please do look for me, Jonno White, to tag me, and look to tag Clarity on whatever platform you're on. And our team, including me, I'm always looking to see when people have mentioned us so that I can engage with you. And also we look at sharing content. So if you write something about something we've done, there's also a good chance we'll share that with our followers. So if you could do that, that is a massive, massive help as we try to invest in as many leaders as we can around the world. Last of all, you can check out my book about how to deal with difficult people even if you hate conflict. It's called Step Up or Step Out. It's available on Amazon. You can just look up Step Up or Step Out Jonno White, or you can go to store.consultclarity.org/book and check it out there. I have coached leader after leader after leader, and in more than 50% of the sessions, this topic comes up. How do I deal with this person? I'm finding it really difficult, and I just want to find a way that doesn't blow up to just to have a difficult conversation, to lead them better. How do I do that? There's a 3-step process that I outline in this book that I believe can help you. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Today's guest is Reid Goossens. Reid is another Aussie like me, and we're going to find out all about him today. So Reid, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, mate, for having me on the show.
And I just found out before we started recording that you come from a pretty, it's got to be one of the most beautiful spots in the world, up in Noosa in Queensland, which many people may not know about. But gee, you can't pick many more beautiful places in the world to grow up than Noosa.
Yeah, just up the street, right from Brisbane, right?
Yeah, that's right,
Just
which is
a
where I am.
stone's throw away.
Yeah, so it's great to chat with you. Love chatting with another Aussie, but you're now in the US. We're going to find out a bit more about your story today. But first, give our listeners a bit of a window into what you're doing now, and a day in the life of Reed.
Yeah, sure. So I have built a company here in the United States. It is a syndication company, a real estate syndication company, where I pool investors' money together and we go out and buy large commercial real estate, specifically multifamily apartment buildings. And we look to grow the net operating income of those apartment buildings by doing renovations, increasing rents, attracting a different renter demographic, and all whilst growing our investors' capital, preserving it obviously is first and foremost, but then giving it back to them with a good return, cash flow, all the tax depreciation benefits of investing in physical assets. Built a company today. We have about $650 million of assets under management. And I moved to the US about 10 years ago, and I had no dream ever to think that I was going to do this type of real estate. But here we are 10 years later, and it's I look back and think, wow. And some of the lessons learned along the way has been can probably share a lot of them with your audience, and and just reflect on some of the things that have gone well and that have gone wrong at the same time.
Yeah, fantastic. That's a great segue to hear about your story in a second. But one of my another podcast guest recently shared this quote, which is, "There's not winning and losing. There's only winning and learning." And
Mm-hmm.
that's so good because, but it doesn't make it easier sometimes when you're in the moment and you, like we all do, you put your foot in it or you drop the ball, but that's what shapes us. So tell us about you starting as far back as you want, your story to end up doing what you're doing,
Sure.
and some of those numbers are blowing my mind. I think it's so, well, I mean, it might sound a bit lame, but I think that's so cool that you're doing that, and I hear that and I go, wow, that's awesome. As I think about one property, so I have a lot of
Right.
respect and interest in what you do, and keen to learn from you. But tell us about your story. What are some of those moments that really shaped Reed becoming the leader and the person you are today?
Oh, look, it obviously starts back at the family home, right? I grew up on the Sunshine Coast in Karoi, and went to Sunshine Beach State High School. Proudly went to that school, and what shaped me probably early on in my life was actually my dad was the deputy principal of Sunshine Beach State High. So going to school with dad as the deputy dog always was weird. Obviously, people made fun of me at some times, but there was some perks to it. I got to choose my teachers, which was probably one of the limited perks. But yeah, going to being I'm sure some of your listeners out there probably had teachers, parents as teachers at school. So it's a weird dichotomy growing up as a young teen. Um, graduated high school, went to uni in your town of Brisbane at the University of Queensland, and that's where I studied structural engineering, and really, had a thirst to leave Australia and go conquer the world, so to speak. When I finished university, and that's what I did at 21 years of age, I went to London and worked on as a structural engineer. I worked on the 2012 Olympic Games, but in 2008, preparing different infrastructure projects, and first real job out of uni, and was straight into the belly of the beast, and having limited or literally zero commercial experience as a structural engineer, and being thrown into some pretty epic projects, definitely helped shape my view of the world, and managing people and all that sort of stuff. And then from there, I took a year off and went to the south of France, and was a deckhand on a super yacht for a Russian billionaire. And there's a lot of other stories in that we can keep for another time. But part of that journey also was bumping into my then girlfriend, now wife,
Oh,
Erica, and
wow.
we bumped
Yeah.
into each other in 2009 on the beaches of San Sebastian. I was having a
Oh,
weekend
incredible.
off, running of the bulls, and then we bumped into each other and stayed in contact. And she's obviously American, hence why I'm in the United States. And yeah, sort of the rest is in history. There's a lot more stories in there, but that's a little bit of the background of just coming, to the US. We ultimately ended up moving to the US in 2012, really just to be an expat and live in New York City, and chase a bit of a dream. And the goal was probably just to move here, chase this girl, see if it works out, and Well, if it doesn't, I'll move back to Australia. If it does, well, fantastic. So, yeah, that's sort of maybe the last probably 2004 to 2010 or 12 jam packed into 30 seconds here.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I have to admit that that year on a as a deckhand on a super yacht does sound like a reality show. Like Reed, come and spend a year with Reed on the
There
super
actually is
yacht.
a reality show here in the US called Below Deck,
Oh, there
and
you go.
it's on a I think yeah. So there is one, and obviously I was blazing a trail back in 2009. It's really popular these days, but it was an
Yeah.
incredible experience across the Atlantic Ocean from Monaco to the Caribbean on this yacht, and it's a motor yacht, obviously not a sailing yacht, but yeah, rubbing shoulders with the uber wealthy of the world was next level.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. So let's zoom in on the. I'm really interested in your transition from structural engineering to doing what you're doing now. I mean, it's
Hmm.
incredible what you're doing. I do see some crossover, but there's a lot that I can imagine you were stepping out and into sort of the unknown at some points. Do you remember any particular big aha moments where you really made the call? This is what I'm going to chase.
Yeah. Look, coming back from 2 years being abroad, so in 2008, 2009, and 2010, I'm back in Australia after being away for 2 years. London, south of France, chase this girl, fall in love with this American girl. I'm back in a cubicle in Brisbane, actually in West End, working for a mining company, and just realizing, just like, geez, I'm mid-20s and I didn't sign up for to be a small piece I feel like a small cog in a large machine, which was corporate Australia. And so through that, I really wanted someone just to pay me to live my life, and that's where I picked up the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. Stumbled across that. I didn't even know what the word entrepreneurship meant, but in the book it talks about becoming financially free, so you can go surf the world and travel and do whatever you want. So ultimately, it started from a pain point of like, this is not what I signed up for in terms of being, entering the corporate world. And so in 2010 and 11, I'm sort of immersing myself in everything real estate, because I was like, well, hang on, I've got this background in structural engineering. Why not use real estate? Seems like to be a really natural next step. And my dad,
Yeah.
even though he's just not just, but he's a high school teacher and a deputy principal, he had a bit of success in buying real estate, and just family homes and appreciation. And I was like, that makes sense. I build these things. Why not invest in them? And so I went down a path of self education, of learning how to fix and flip and do lease options in Australia. And I was really learning and consuming as much as I could. And then really, at the end of 2011, when Erica had sort of finished her master's degree in Australia, I really still wanted to live abroad. And I'd saved up a bit of money. I was going to do something in Australia in terms of a side hustle, or go buy my first deal and fix and flip it, and whatever you want to talk about it. But ultimately, we moved to New York. I said, well, look, I'm going to regret this. I'm 26. If I don't move now, when will I ever move? And so I packed up. We packed up and moved halfway across the world and moved in with Erica, and that's really the start of the pivot away from structural engineering. Now I'll fast forward a little bit. I was in a structural engineering job for the first 3 years of living in the United States, but I rocked up to New York City without a job, right? And I needed a job to stay in the country. The E3 visa, for any of those people who are out there listening and are familiar with it. It's a really great little visa. If you've got a job, you can be in the country for 2 years, and it's renewable indefinitely. So, yeah, that was sort of the pivot into the US, and then from there, I quickly realized, well, hang on, I've got this engineering job. It's great. It's paying the bills, keeping the roof over the head. But literally within 2 weeks of being fresh off the boat, I was at my first real estate investment, call it networking event in New York City. And I thought Australia had some pretty good networking events, but geez, this was networking on steroids. And it was fast talking Americans, talking about real estate. I quickly realized that back in 2012, and just in general, the US had such lower barriers to entry into the real estate market than what you'd find back in Australia, back at home. And so I'm like, wow, there's these sort of markets that are outside of these big major cities that I could buy a property, I could buy a triplex, and I remember buying my first triplex for $38,000. And so that's the sort of start of my side hustle. And fast forward a couple of years, I was able to leave the corporate America in 2017 after I got my green card and pursue what I'm doing today. But there's a lot of steps along the way there that I'm sure we're going to unpack. But that was, the coming to America story. The passion was started from the Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It got the spark going. I really wanted to always be my own boss, and it was through figuring it out and putting one foot in front of the other, in self-education and putting myself out there to go out and figure it out and built what I built today.
Yeah, incredible story. And if we keep going from there, I guess as you really started building your business, what advice would you give to Reed back then? Like, if there are leaders or entrepreneurs listening who are really wanting to not just real estate, but also just start their own business, that whole rich dad, poor dad idea of investing and creating something, real estate or otherwise, what advice would you give to Reed at that point that you've learned now, 10 years down the track?
Look, I look back on my last 10 years and not that I've, arrived by any sense of the means. I've still got so many things I want more to achieve, but I think in general, it's about the advice looking back is, and I didn't know it at the time, but learn to take a bet on yourself, right? Like there's no one's going to come through your front door and hand you what you want to go out and, your goals and your aspirations. You've got to go out and take action. And so ultimately that comes through a self-belief that I, as a human being, am worth taking that bet on. So the coming to the leaving Australia and moving halfway across the world. Well, that was a bet. Is this going to even work out? Am I even going to get a job? I rocked up with a tourist visa and chasing this girl. And so a little bit of the naivety, looking back on it, probably helped me be not aware of what I didn't know. Actually helped me be a little bit blinded by I'm just going to go out and achieve this, and I'm not going to take no for an answer. So the advice is that, for the people listening is what's the risk? Like taking a bet on yourself and going out and starting something you're really passionate about. What's the risk? You're going to look back when you're 60 or 70 years of age and have regret. And for me, that's really what drives me, is that fear of regret, that fear of waking up when I'm 80 years of age and go, geez, I wish I moved to the United States back in 2012. So for those people out there listening to the show, learn to take a bet on yourself. The risk isn't as big as you think it is. We are so resilient as human beings, and we will figure it out. And it's sometimes when you put yourself in those uncomfortable positions that there is no ripcord, there is no plan B, you burnt the boats. The only way your back's against the wall, the only way to do it is figure it out, right? And ultimately you will. So there'll be lessons along the way, there'll be failures, it's all those sort of stuff and more. But know that with the long-term mindset that you are worth taking a bet on, and you are worth investing time in yourself and investing in time in something that you're really, really passionate about.
Yeah, that's good. I like that advice. Take a bet on yourself. And interesting that you look back and see some of that naivety might have actually helped you because you weren't afraid to just try things. That now you might look back on it and go, having more experience, oh, gee, that was silly that I did that. But you didn't know that then. But that probably led to some doors opening.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And we as entrepreneurs and leaders you have to always be pivoting, right? There's never just a cruising altitude. You always have to be keeping up with times, whether technology or understanding the next wave of information coming through in whatever business you are. You've always got to be sort of a student of learning. And I think that's when people get stuck and stagnant in life, is that they stop learning. They think they know it all. And they're not willing to keep learning and to keep growing as a human. And that leads to being a good leader, and that leads to being a good entrepreneur and all these other things in life that we strive to be. But it does come from a curiosity about, wanting to do more and be more with your life.
Yeah, that's so good. And what I love about that is that it's something that you can just start doing. A lot of other stuff, I feel like sometimes you go, oh, well, that's hard. How do I get started? But I remember for me, I sort of did this accidentally. I told this story on another episode, but I just realized, you know what? I'm in an echo chamber in terms of leadership. Like I'm listening to the same people again and again, and it's gold, and I'm using it, and it's I'm seeing incredible results. But I just realized I just suddenly sort of had this hunger to really start hearing some disparate and different opinions. And so I just started, like, it sounds simple, but I just started watching book summaries. I know it sounds
Hmm.
funny watching book summaries, but I love animated book summaries and going, okay, well, if I'm going to invest my time in that, and I went through, there's a great YouTube channel called Productivity Game. And I think the guy's name
Mm.
is Nathan, who's behind it. It's got about 500,000 subscribers, but it's amazing. And there's like a couple of hundred books, and he's so thorough and great insights, short, about 8 minutes normally. And I've watched all of those videos, and out of those videos, I then went and started reading some of these books that normally wouldn't come across my desk, and it's just exploded. Like my I feel like my vision and what I it has been so much better, and I'm so thankful I did that. But I probably fell into it a bit. But now it's one of the things that I say to others, like you've got to get out of that echo chamber, learn and be curious, and just go and like chat to people, learn from people. I don't know if you find this with your podcast, but it's also, this is like the most amazing way to learn is to be the first listener who chats with someone. And so this has been like the probably the thing that I learn the most from now. But whatever you do, it's something you
Yeah,
can
no,
just go and
I
do
would.
today.
I would completely agree. I think it's for those people listening who don't have a podcast, and I've got one as well that's been going for many, many years. And it is I completely agree with that. It becomes nearly like a mentor to me, and probably same with you, Jonno. But for those people who don't have a podcast, like look at who in your industry you strive to be, and try and be around them. So it's really cliche, and I hate saying this, sort of surround you. You're the average person of the 5 people you surround yourself with, but that is true, and that also comes to what you're listening to, what you're feeding your brain in terms of the content that you're consuming. If you're just consuming rubbish on television and not listening to podcasts or not listening to books or abbreviated books or whatever in a field that you're really passionate about, well, you're never going to get anywhere, because again, it goes back to that continuing to be curious and continue to learn. And then through the action of reading and listening and learning, then taking that next step and saying, well, hang on, I found someone I really, really like, or I resonate with in a space that I want to go and dominate. How do I be more like them? How do I get a mentor who can sort of pave the way? And for me, on my journey, a lot of what you do in your business as well, Jonno, is like is surround yourself with coaches and mentors so you can be the best version of yourself. And they talk a lot about a lot about Michael Jordan, and how he has great coaches. Those coaches were never great players, but they needed to be there to make Michael Jordan a great player. And the same applies to leadership, to running businesses, to being, even just being a good bloody human being. Is that
Absolutely.
you need people in your corner who are going to help you strive to be you know to be the to live your most fulfilled life, and don't have that sort of unfulfilled potential. So I really do think it all does start with curiosity and listening to sort of easy to consume podcasts and books, but you've got to constantly be doing it, and then taking the next step and finding people who you want to be like, and surrounding yourself with them.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. And you're right, it's not just business, it's also life, isn't it? Those people. And that's what I'm
Yep.
finding with the podcast. Yes, it's leadership, but I feel like I'm learning so much about life. And you nailed it. It is like a mentor. This podcast has become mentoring 101 for Jonno. I learned so much, and I enjoy that. I find it just, yeah, I just love being challenged and hearing things and going, whoa, like I've never thought of it like that, or I completely disagreed before I heard this person unpack that, and that's so different. Um, let's come back to you. I'm interested to know. There's always that moment. Well, you can tell me if there was for you as an entrepreneur where you're dreaming, there's a vision, and then it's real, and you actually go, okay, I've been telling everyone, I've been believing it in my DNA, but there's a moment or a deal or something that happens where you go,
Mm.
okay, that actually is legit. I wasn't I wasn't just dreaming, because a lot of people might tell you that when you first start out. Do you remember what that was for you? When did
Yep.
you really see the
Look,
fruit?
it actually was quite recently. So my first ever, we'll call it lead syndication, and I won't get into the nuances of lead versus not lead, but the deal that I led from start to finish, I bought in 2016, and I recently just sold it like 2 weeks ago. And back when I closed on that deal, it was 192 units. It was a $16 million deal. I had to raise, me and my business partner had to raise something like $7 million. I was still working full time. I remember, and I wrote an article at the time, the top lessons learned from closing on a deal. And it's all well and good to close on a deal, but it's also then, I just wrote a recent article on the top 5 lessons learned coming full cycle, and how important it is in order to go out and do what I said I was going to do. I raise money from investors. Investors trust me with their capital, their hard earned money. I've got to treat that money better than I even treat my own money. And in the beginning, people took bets on us, right? I didn't have a massive track record. I was, 30, I'm 35 now, so it must have been 29 at the time. And it was, looking back on that like, you go to conferences, you do these deals, and even as getting to that first deal to the finish line, to to close on it, was a massive. I could talk about it for a whole hour, but then bringing it 5 years full cycle, exiting, and then giving back investors a really fantastic return on their money. And I'm not trying to plug myself here, but it was, I poured my blood, sweat, and tears into that. And it was just like writing this article 5 years later, looking back on the lessons I'd learned, was like, yeah, this freaking business works. And up until then, you always, not that you didn't know it didn't work, but ultimately as a syndicator, like in the first couple of deals, I don't get paid. I don't get paid till the deal sells. So I need
Yeah.
to be working really my butt off for my investors to make sure I'm a good steward of their capital. And when I can go back to them and say, here, like I just doubled your money in 5 years, like that's freaking incredible. And I'm like, and I sometimes got to slap myself because I'm like, did that just happen? Did I just do that? Because I still, even to this day, suffer from imposter monster. Even after
Yeah.
the portfolio I built, even after the runs on the board, you still got to pinch yourself a little bit. And I think that's never getting too far out over your skis. It's never getting too big for your britches. It's just keeping humble in the way you approach things. And I think doing those, taking solace and stopping and reflecting on some of the lessons learned, particularly in my industry or in anyone's industry, it's really good to see where you've come from, because we sometimes get so consumed with the mountaintop we want to scale to that we forget to enjoy the journey along the way. And just so back to your original question, it was just recently that I stopped, said, wow, this deal's come full cycle. This is my first ever deal as lead syndicator. I've returned investors money, I've doubled their money, really fantastic returns, knocked it out of the park. There's definitely been some massive lessons along the way and some errors that I've made, but we did it, right? We did what we set out we're going to go do. And that was just a really rewarding time for me as, in the field that I'm in. And so I think there's probably other people out there listening. I encourage you to stop and reflect on the journey you've come across, because again, if we're so focused on where we're going, we don't understand where we've come from. We then miss the little things in the journey along the way to think, wow, yeah, look how far I have come. And those are the moments that you realize this is worth continuing to push, and the long nights and the weekends and all those hard things, building a business from scratch. This is what it's worth. This is what it's all for.
Yeah, that's so good, and I think I really resonate with that. I remember when I did my first leadership team offsite, and I'd done some work with teams. I'd done some work with my own team, but I'd never really, like, you had to do your first one at some point. And so for me, I had a client paid me to come in and go offsite with their leadership team, and I remember there was like I'm a pretty positive guy. I'm very futuristic and full of vision, but there's still 1% that's like somewhere in there that's like, maybe I can't do this. Maybe it is just a dream. And that feeling of just those, like, that was just the initial step, but those couple of days where people went, this was really wow, this like really helped us as a team was such a relief.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember when everything came full circle? Do you remember where you were? Do you remember when you got that final? And did you do anything to
Well,
celebrate? How did you feel?
yeah, well, it's just like, we've closed on 14 or 15 deals in the last 5 years, to build the portfolio to what it is. And that's great putting deals into the portfolio, but it's that full cycle and saying, we brought into the portfolio, we did what we added value, we sold it, we got to an exit. Here you go, investor. And so it was literally just the writing of knowing that this sale was coming up. I sort of said, look, I've got to go back and reflect on this, because I can't leave lessons on the table without writing them down. And look, maybe I don't have a huge following, but I've got a bit of a following. And if someone can take a little bit of education out of that, so I can pass on the buck to make it that a little bit easier for that next person, then that's freaking awesome as well. So sort of, it's nearly like a double, not a double-edged sword, but two sides of the coin. It's the coming full cycle, realizing I'm not an imposter, but also then being able to reflect and give some lessons out to people who are also aspiring to be in the position that I'm in. Because I'd also realized that I'm in a pretty freaking awesome position. So,
Yeah.
other people are aspiring to do what I do. And so why not give a little bit back? And hey, here's some of the lessons. So it was in and around crafting a blog post that I did. I'm not a great writer, but it was just mind dumping, and through that exercise, and then reading the article I wrote 5 years ago, it was just like, wow, I remember writing that. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. So it's
So
always
good.
just really, really good to get into the habit of reflecting on where you've come from.
Yeah, I love that advice. Well, what we might do is see if we can get those two links to those two articles and put them in the show notes, because I think there'd be a bunch of people who'd be wanting to read those, and I love that the big aha moment for you, and probably you nailed it when you said, if we're not careful, we just keep climbing, don't we? And don't stop and actually reflect on the journey. And for you, it was actually writing that blog that really helped you stop and reflect. So I think that's good advice.
That's right.
As
That's right.
well.
And that's, people talk about journaling all the time. That's why it's good to journal and get it out of the mind and take a breath every now and then. So
100%. Journaling is one of those things that sounds a bit over simple, but it's like too simple, but it's not, is it? It's like there's actually something about just writing
no,
stuff down that is a game changer, and it's such a simple idea that it's easy to forget. So I love that you brought that up.
exactly.
That's so good. I probably need to do that myself. Let's jump into Leadership Express. I've got a bunch of questions for you. Ready?
Let's do it.
What is a book that you've gifted to other people?
The book that I've gifted, I haven't gifted it, but I've recommended it a lot. And it's actually an Australian author. I've had him on my podcast. I'm a big fanboy of his. It's Dan Priestley. He wrote the book Key Person of Influence. Highly recommend grabbing your hands on one of those if you can. He's an incredible author, and in and around changing your mindset about how to, in any business, become what he calls a KPI, a key person of influence, to attract more leads, to grow the business, to grow the strategic partnerships, and so that's probably been one of my favorite books to recommend.
Yeah, love it. Great recommendation, Dan Priestley. Awesome. Any great podcasts? We'll get you to mention yours, but any others as well that you're listening to, or other sources that you're just really loving reading, watching, listening to right now?
Look, I think that how we built this, how I built this, I think
Yes.
is on both Guy Raz on NPR is extremely powerful. Again, having conversations with these leaders and founders and talking about the trials and tribulations just helps you put it into context that these big companies started from such small beginnings, and we all start from small beginnings. So, mentioning numbers and portfolio sizes and, assets under management, blah, 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 revenue, all that crap. It all starts from an idea, and it all starts from hustling and grinding. And it seems to be very, very similar story across so many of those podcasts.
Yeah, that's so good. And just remind us of your podcast so people can go and check that out.
Yes, it's called Investing in the US. It's on, you can just search my name, Reed Goossens, ReedGoossens, called Investing in the US. And we've been going for about 6 years now, over 300 episodes, and loving every minute of it.
Congratulations. That's great work. What is a great piece of advice you've received?
Um, I think the one that comes to mind is from my dad, actually. I remember him telling me all these years ago, a fool and their money are easily parted. And, so what does that mean? Okay, well, don't be a fool when it comes to your money. Go out and educate yourself on what you want to invest in, whether it be the stock market, whether it be real estate, whether it be a business, whatever it is. Just get educated on it. And it goes back to the underlying theme of this podcast is in and around education and being curious and continuing to educate yourself over time and be a steward of, be a student, a consistent student. And so, yeah, I think I have to chalk it up to my dad.
Yeah, that's a great quote. Love it. A movie or TV show that really impacted you?
Oh, movie or TV show?
It
Like
doesn't have
I
to
don't
be
watch a lot of.
serious. We had recently I've had great leaders and entrepreneurs recommend The Golden Girls, Ally McBeal, Mr. Bean. So I have to
Yeah, look,
admit
I would
more.
have to. I would have to. Yeah, I think there was a couple. Probably, I was a massive fan of Man from Snow River when I was a kid because I was just really into
Oh
horses back
yes,
in the day.
yeah.
But then more recently, I think if I look back, I'm really, I think in comedians and really funny comedians is an intelligence that I don't have, but it is a really supreme intelligence, and
Yes.
being so quick and witty. And so the original Office, Ricky Gervais,
Oh
early
yeah,
two
yeah.
thousands was just absolutely game changing. I'm coming through university at that stage, so it was just very like cringeworthy, but also cutting edge, and I love that. So yeah, I'd have to
That's
chalk it up to Ricky Gervais in the original Office.
that's great. That's an awesome recommendation. I love that. Fantastic. What is a tip for finding and keeping great talent?
Yeah, what's a tip for finding and keeping great talent? I think it starts with your mission statement, your values, and how you build your company culture. I think it comes as a leader of people. Again, I lead a few people in my organization. It also, you need to be self-reflecting on where you are weak as a leader and understanding that people around you can also see that. So culture, mission and statement, values, but also being self-aware as a leader will help others in your organization know that they are worthy and that their input is welcome. So I think all those things we could again talk about a whole podcast on that, on how to retain talent, but it definitely does start with not just compensation. It starts from seeing and hearing people in certain strategic leadership roles. So you are attracting the right type of talent.
That is pretty good advice. I couldn't like that was gold. You could put that on a bumper sticker. That was fantastic because I completely agree. I think if you like you want a magnet like a magnet, you want your company to attract the values mission driven people, and if you can be a self aware leader, like I couldn't have said that better myself. That's such great advice, and yet so much of the time we focus on other things. And yet, if you nail
Right.
those things, I completely agree. That was awesome, Reed. Loved it. Okay, last question. If you could only give one piece of leadership advice and maybe entrepreneurship advice to a young person out there, or and to someone who's maybe not necessarily young, but they're looking at their side hustle, going, maybe I can turn this into what Reed's done. What advice would you give them if you could only say one thing?
I think it goes back to what I said earlier, and that's learn to take a bet on yourself. I think that really, really, we self guess. Sorry, we self criticize and have imposter monster syndrome. We always, have second guesses and people telling us we shouldn't do things. But
Mm,
ultimately, at the end of the day, you're the driver, and you have to learn to take a bet on yourself, and that's as simple as that. And it's the thing that boils down to the most is once you learn to do that, you'll start taking, being pushing the boundaries, getting uncomfortable, and you'll learn to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations because like me leaving my job or moving halfway across the world. It's uncomfortable. It's those situations that you put yourself in that help you realize that you are taking a bet on yourself, and you can do it, and you're going to succeed, and you're going to just be fine.
Great advice for everyone out there, I think, to consider, particularly those who are at the tipping point of maybe stepping out and trying something. So I know we've mentioned this a couple of times, but where can people find you if they want to connect with you and with your company and with your podcast?
Mm-hmm. Easiest way to go is just go to reedgoossens.com. That's reedgoossens.com. Podcast is there, books are there, all the educational materials. And if you're ever coming through Los Angeles, you're getting back on a plane, hit me up at info@reedgoossens.com. Love meeting up and talking shop for a coffee or a beer. Just give me a few weeks head notice and we can get you on the calendar.
Love it. Fantastic. Well, thank you to our listeners for tuning in. I love episodes that end up, sort of accidentally having these amazing themes. And I think Reed nailed it when he said, today that idea of learning and also having, being willing to bet on yourself has been a real theme of today, which I really believe there'll be people out there who needed to hear that. And don't forget, for our listeners, I also have the Jonno White Leadership Podcast and also the Leadership Question of the Day, 2 other podcasts that I do that you can tune into and get some more advice and a stone in your shoe around the questions and just be challenged. But I want to finish today by saying a massive thank you to Reed for coming on the show, for telling your amazing story. And I believe there'll be some people listening who go, actually, you know what? I'm going to do that now. I wasn't going to because I was too, freaked out about it. But now that I've heard Reed's story, I'm gonna give it a go. If he can travel halfway across the world and do what he's done, then I'm gonna step out. So thank you, mate. That was so much fun.
Awesome. Cheers, buddy.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast as much as I did. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, including our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from all over the world in all different roles, in different industries, answer these 7 questions on leadership, and leaders give these in-depth answers around how they spend their time, a book that's been significant for them. It's just a gold mine. It's completely free to access, so go to consultclarity.org and look for that. We'd also love to interview you about your leadership. I believe your experience, your life, your context means that you have advice on leadership that other leaders can learn from. Yes, you, if you're going, not me. Well, no, I really believe you would have something to add. So if you're looking for a way to give back, it's completely free to get involved. And we would love to interview you through the 7 Questions on Leadership. You just go to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form and get involved. We have a free resource on our website called the Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook, 10 world-class leaders giving their thoughts on leadership, and that's completely free. It's available on our homepage, consultclarity.org, right at the top, so make sure you go and get that and download it today. And we have a free daily email that you can subscribe to. We send this out to over 15,000 leaders from around the world. And it contains the highlights of content from our podcasts, our blogs, our books we're reading. It's got the best content, and it gives you exclusive, limited, early access to our masterclasses, workshops, new products, special offers. It's all for our subscribers. You can go to consultclarity.org/subscribe and join 15,000 other leaders. And my gift to you is to work really hard, particularly through the Leadership Conversations podcast. I have been blown away by the quality of the leaders, and I'm learning as much as anyone in doing these interviews. So I'm having a great time. And my gift to you is to keep lining up the best leaders I can to invest in your leadership. Your gift to me, if you're finding this helpful, there is something that you could do that would help us out massively. And that is to write a review and to leave a rating for our podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. I can't tell you how much that helps us out. Also, subscribe or follow. It really does make a difference in helping us to help more leaders become everything they're meant to be. Another thing that means a lot to me personally is when I see our community share our content. So if you do share this or any other piece of content on social media, then thank you, and please do that. And look for me, Jonno White, or Clarity, and tag us in your post. Our team is always looking for posts to engage with from our community, and there's also a chance that we'll share your content to go beyond and share it with our followers. Last of all, you can check out my book. It's called Step Up or Step Out: How to Deal with Difficult People Even If You Hate Conflict. I wrote this book because 50% of the coaching sessions I have with leaders, this topic comes up again and again and again. And it's this idea of, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead this person better when I'm finding them difficult? Or in some cases, you look and you say, I think I might be leading a difficult person. They're just quite difficult to lead, or I'm finding them quite difficult to lead. So there's a 3-step process that I unpack in Step Up or Step Out. And the amazing thing, and I've literally done this myself, and I've heard it anecdotally from other leaders as I've coached them, is that if you follow this process, you will see that person step up and change their behavior or make a decision, which is to step out some of the time. 95% of the time, people will step up or step out in just 4 weeks. And I stand by that. It's you have to read the book to understand, but I really do believe in it, and I've experienced it firsthand. It works. So you can go to Amazon, look up Step Up or Step Out Jonno White, or store.consultclarity.org/book. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back with a new episode next time of the Leadership Conversations podcast. And I hope today has helped you to take another step towards becoming the leader you're meant to be. See you next time.